Thanks again for joining us this morning. And before we start, I'd like to thank our sponsor for our morning briefing, Triple, the transitional path to independent living. We certainly appreciate their continued support. This year is going to be a big year in politics for Pennsylvania, and we want to, especially with the U.S. Senate and gubernatorial races, we want to welcome our old friend Jon Delano, Money and Politics editor from KDKA-TV, CBS Pittsburgh, who's been covering politics and money in southwestern Pennsylvania for over 27 years. Jon, good morning.
Good morning, Jeff. Great to be with you and to all your viewers this morning.
Well, it's always good to see you, and thanks for being with us. It's going to be a big year in politics for Pennsylvania, and if you wouldn't mind taking it from here, I would remind our audience that at the end of Jon's presentation, we will be taking questions for Jon through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Jon, again, thanks for being with us, and take it away.
Well, good morning again, Jeff. Good morning to everybody as part of the Chamber of Commerce of Washington County. It's really a pleasure to be with you. I love Washington County. I very much love being part of the programs that Jeff and his organization offer to all of you. And I'm absolutely delighted that at 8 a.m. in the morning, you really want to talk politics. I, of course, can talk politics at any hour of the day, and I can wax eloquent or not so eloquent, I guess, depending on the topic. But at 8 a.m. in the morning, I'm always impressed when you get as many folks as we have on now who are willing to listen, talk, and share views. So as Jeff mentioned, I'm going to run through a couple of points about election 2022, campaign 2022, but then I really want to open it up so that if there are questions or issues you'd like to have me address, we'd have time to do so. I'm going to be aided by this with Chase McClain from the Chamber, who's going to throw up some pictures that I've sent over to him as we get and talk about different races. But let me just start by saying the campaign 2022 is going to be a most extraordinary race across the United States of America, but particularly in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Once again, we are the Keystone State. This is the first time really in decades that we are electing both in the primary and the general election two brand new candidates for both governor and the U.S. Senate together. We've not done that, I believe, since the 1950s. So this is quite a historic moment for Pennsylvania. And of course, all eyes are on the governor's race. And I want to focus on that first, because the governor's race, most folks realize that when it comes to politics, they may not think as much about our U.S. senators and our U.S. congressmen, but they all know who the governor is, and they all know how important the governor is. And this year, it's somewhat extraordinary that the Democrats have pretty much resolved who their nominee is, and that is Attorney General Josh Shapiro. Shapiro is either the luckiest politician in the world, or he is one of the greatest in the way that he's engineered a process by which he automatically becomes the nominee of the Democratic Party. And it's very important for Pennsylvania who the governor is, because everybody's assuming that the legislature will remain Republican. So you either have a Democratic governor who checks and balances the legislature, particularly on issues involving social issues, involving things like a woman's right to choose an abortion, for example. Or you have a Republican governor who is in pretty much lockstep with the Republicans in the General Assembly. There's not much to say about Shapiro. I think most everybody knows him. It's going to be clearly he is the odds-on favorite to win the primary. Is he the odds-on favorite to win the general election? We'll talk about that in a second. So let's turn to the Republican candidates. And this gives you, here's the dilemma for the Republican Party. They've got a lot of folks and a lot of good people who are running for governor of Pennsylvania. Now, two of the individuals on this slide have already dropped out. So, and there are others who say they're running. Part of the challenge has been that until last Friday, we weren't circulating nominating petitions. So we won't know really until March 15 who the nominees, the candidates for the Republican nomination actually are, because each of these individuals may be out there circulating petitions, but will they get enough to get on the ballot? in the requisite number of counties. There's a process they have to go through. Some of these faces are probably, most of these faces are probably not familiar to you at all. And I'm not going to run through all of them. Polls suggest that Lou Barletta, who is down in the lower right-hand corner on this slide, is the front runner, but it's such a compact race and nobody has really more than 20, 25 points in the race. Lou Barletta is the former mayor of Hazleton, member of Congress, got well known for his anti-immigration views, and he was an early supporter and the co-chair of Donald Trump's campaign for president in 2016, when President Trump first ran. That's when I met Lou Barletta. I've interviewed most of these people, to be honest, but a number of them are not going to, frankly, I think a number may not make the ballot even. So we shall see. But Lou Barletta clearly is one of those that there's been some attention focused on. He ran for the US Senate in 2018, so there's some familiarity with him. Jake Corman, who is on the bottom panel, second person in. Jake Corman is a state senator. He's been state senator for more than 20 years. He's president pro tem of the Senate, meaning he's the top Republican in the Senate. Some people regard him as a little more moderate than other Republicans. Of course, he would dispute that as he goes into a Republican primary. But the fact is that he shut down efforts by another candidate, Senator Doug Mastriano. That's the gentleman in the top row over on the far right. Senator Mastriano has been a very strong Donald Trump supporter. He led a group to the January 6th attack on the Capitol, although he himself was not involved in any of the violence there. He has believed strongly that the election was won in Pennsylvania by Donald Trump, not Joe Biden, and he's led efforts to investigate that. But those efforts were shut down by Jake Corman, who put them in the hands of somebody who was an ally of Corman rather than a rival, as in Doug Mastriano. Another candidate whose ads you've probably seen on TV is Bill McSwain. He's the gentleman in the top row over at the far left, although his politics are pretty right. Bill McSwain was President Trump's appointee to be the U.S. Attorney for Philadelphia, essentially for Eastern Pennsylvania. And he had a very strong record of cracking down against Black Lives Matter protests and any other kinds of protests that he envisioned as dangerous. And he made a name for himself. He often clashed with the district attorney of Philadelphia, Larry Krasner, who's quite to the left. So Bill McSwain is out there as a candidate. Dave White has been running ads all over the place in Western Pennsylvania. He's the gentleman in the top row, third over. Dave White is a self-made millionaire. He never went to college. He was a member of county council in Delaware County. That's his only elective position. But he has been he's got a ton of money and he's spending it. And he's trying to become well known with his ads here in Pennsylvania, across, particularly in Western Pennsylvania. The only other person I'll mention here is, because many of us know her, is Melissa Hart. She is a candidate in the top row, second from the right. Melissa Hart, the only Republican woman running for governor of Pennsylvania. And so, some people think when you're the only woman on the ballot, that might attract a certain kind of voter. And Melissa Hart certainly is well known in Western Pennsylvania. Whether she's known statewide, I think remains to be seen. So that's a very rough thumbnail of the candidates running for governor of Pennsylvania on the Republican side. As you can see, there's no clear front runner yet. And they're spending a ton of money. They're going to have zero funds when they're over with the May primary. And what happens next? Then they have to start all over again to run against the guy you saw on the first slide, Josh Shapiro. So with that, let's move quickly to the U.S. Senate race. And this is another crazy race in the Republican primary, where these individuals, and there are plenty of others, believe it or not, who are running for the U.S. Senate. that say they're running. But again, we won't know who the nominees are until they file petitions on March 15. At least four of these people, three of the four may be familiar to you. At least two of them are running ads all the time. And if we just run across the column real quick, obviously the first gentleman is Dave McCormick. The attack on the first three individuals, Dave McCormick, Carla Sands, and Mehmet Oz, is that they moved back to Pennsylvania to run for the US Senate. They are carpetbaggers, says the gentleman on the far right, Jeff Bartos, who has lived in Pennsylvania his entire life. He accuses McCormick from Connecticut, Carla Sands from California, and Oz from New Jersey of really just taking advantage of an open seat and their multi-millions of dollars to come back to Pennsylvania, where he would argue, had tenuous connections. Now, of course, each of these three deny that. McCormick will say his family's been here for multiple generations and that he grew up in Pennsylvania, and that's true. He went to school in Pennsylvania, and he actually lived in Pittsburgh for a period of time when he ran free markets and the successor to free markets in Pittsburgh. Carla Sands also grew up in the central part of Pennsylvania, went to IUP and some other schools in Pennsylvania, but she did move out to California. Oh, McCormick moved to Connecticut, 15 years ago, and became the head of a hedge fund in Connecticut, and hasn't been living in Pennsylvania until he moved back to Pittsburgh a few months ago. Carla Sands was President Trump's ambassador to Denmark, but prior to that, she lived in California, where she had married an individual who was a highly successful real estate developer in California. He's passed away. She inherited his resources, and she's got a lot of money. She too moved back to the Cumberland County area, Harrisburg area right now, where she lives. Mehmet Oz, his ties to Pennsylvania is that he went to the University of Pennsylvania, my alma mater. He got both a medical degree and a business degree from Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania, and he married a woman from suburban Philadelphia. But he basically has lived outside the state, lived in New Jersey, has a big mansion in New Jersey. A year or so ago, he basically rented his in-laws' place in suburban Philadelphia. He registered to vote there. He's voted a couple times absentee, but now he says Pennsylvania is his home, and he's back here in Pennsylvania. That other gentleman you won't recognize, George Bochetto, is a lawyer from Philadelphia. I'm not entirely clear why he's running, but he is, and he's really interesting to talk to and to listen to. But he's in the race. He doesn't have anywhere near the money that the other first three that I mentioned have. Jeff Bartos was a Republican candidate for lieutenant governor, a businessman, a real estate developer. He's made money himself. He doesn't have anywhere near the money that the first three have, but he's been getting substantial support in the Republican Party from Republican committee people. He is a true Pennsylvanian. There's no way to call him an outsider, and but he doesn't have the resources of the other candidates. No one can predict who's going to win. Some people think it's between McCormick and Oz. As you know, they are both savaging each other through their super PACs and accusing each other of being friends of China or rhinos, Republican in name only. This campaign is making the television stations a heck of a lot of money, and it's going to continue, I know, all the way through May 17th. So let's move on to the Democratic primary, which is also a bit up in the air. Now, when we look at the Democratic primary here in Western Pennsylvania, we focus in on these two gentlemen. Congressman Connor Lamb, no stranger to Washington County. He represented Washington County for a short period of time when he won the first special election. And John Fetterman, the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, former mayor of Duquesne, PA. These two gentlemen we see from a Western Pennsylvania perspective as the principal candidates. Fetterman has done an absolutely incredible job raising money. Now, he spent a lot of money to raise money. He spent over $10 million. He's raised over $10 million, but he has $5 million in the bank because a lot of that money is used to pay off the people he uses for fundraising. And it's an incredible machine that he's put together. But he's got far more money than Connor Lamb, who has something in the neighborhood, I think, of $2.5 million. So he may be outnumbered 2-to-1. And the Lamb folks, there's an effort to create a super PAC to support Connor Lamb, led by James Carville, who many of you may know as the political pundit who, frankly, was very involved with the original governor, Bob Casey, and going way back years. That's when I first met him many, many, many years ago. But at this point, it's not clear whether the super PAC has raised enough money, because there's a variety of reasons, part of which is that the Democratic establishment doesn't know what to make quite of John Fetterman. They're not sure that he really can lose the election or can win an election. And so it's not as clear cut as Connor Lamb would like people to believe, that only he, Connor Lamb, can win the US Senate for the Democrats. This is a big, big race because control of the US Senate may well hinge on Pennsylvania, and this race is going to make a huge difference. Although we in the West focus on Connor Lamb and John Fetterman, there's another candidate, Malcolm Kenyatta. This young gentleman is obviously African-American. He's also gay. He has been outspoken in the Philadelphia area. He's a state representative in Philadelphia, the first openly gay Black state representative. A lot of liberal groups, very liberal groups, have signed on board with him, including some in Pittsburgh, in this region. He doesn't have the money that either Lamb or Fetterman has. It's probably unlikely you'll see him on TV, but he could be a spoiler in this race. It's not clear whether he hurts Fetterman more than he hurts Lamb. The fact that he'll have Philadelphia after his name and the other two will have Allegheny County after their names on the May 17 ballot could just take a lot of votes away from a lot of both the two Western Pennsylvanians. So it remains unclear. These are the three major candidates in the US Senate race. We'll see if anybody else surfaces. So let's move on to the next slide. This is take a sip of water here. This is the new congressional map for Pennsylvania. 17 congressional districts. This map was picked by the state Supreme Court because it was drafted by a professor out at Stanford in California, and it was embraced by some citizens. So it's not one of the partisan maps offered by the Democrats or the Republicans. Actually, when you look at the map, it slightly favors the Republicans, even though Democrats outnumber Republicans in Pennsylvania by 600,000 voters. The geography is such that it's pretty hard to draw without cutting across county lines in ways that are unacceptable to the state Supreme Court. Very partisan districts. These are fairly compact districts as you look at them. And frankly, of the 17, I think it's likely that we're going to see 9 Republicans and 8 Democrats, although there's some challenging seats for the Democrats. We'll see what happens. Here in Washington County, you can see all of Washington County is in the 14th district, represented by Guy Reschenthaler. And it's a pretty solidly Republican district. It has added Somerset County in, parts of Indiana County. The district has expanded. It includes, while in the old district, part of Westmoreland was in the 13th district, it's now almost all united, although part of the city of Pittsburgh district, the 12th district, as you can see, sweeps into Westmoreland County. For this region, it's pretty solidly Republican. Guy Reschenthaler is running for re-election. I'm hearing that there is a Democrat named Todd Rowley who is going to run against him. Todd Rowley is a Democrat from Westmoreland County who ran in the 13th district 2 years ago. I remember interviewing him at the time, and I'm sure we'll hear more from him, but this is an uphill slog for a Democrat in the 14th district. But again, for Washington County purposes, the county is all together in one congressional district. Obviously, we have battles going on in the 12th district to succeed Mike Doyle. We have a Democratic Socialist running, and we have a more moderate Democrat and a couple people in between. So that's going to be an interesting race. The 17th district is the old Connor Lamb district. That is the one district that's very much up for grabs. The Republicans could win it, and the Democrats could win it. And no one's sure what exactly is going to happen. We've got some candidates emerging in that district, which I can talk about if you want, but it's not Washington County, so it's obviously north of the county. So that's pretty much the congressional scene as I see it at the moment, and we could talk about any of these districts if you wish. But let's move on to the state Senate. The state Senate. Washington County is totally united in the state Senate district. Camera Bartolotta is the Republican incumbent, and she is up for re-election this year. You can see that this district is, and in fact, the Legislative Reapportionment Commission, I know it's been criticized, but I think they did a pretty good job of trying to keep counties intact for state Senate districts. And you can see that the 46th senatorial district, Greene County, Washington County, and the southern part of Beaver County. The districts that are in the city of, or in Allegheny County are all within Allegheny County. None of them bleed over into other counties. The 39th senatorial, that's Kim Ward. She's the majority leader of the state Senate, Republican. And as you can see, the 45th, 37th, there's the 42nd and the 40th are also there. The numbers are not on the screen. This is the State House district, and it's kind of hard sometimes to understand the particular communities. So I'm going to run through the numbers real quick in terms of who represents what. The 15th district, you can see Washington County is represented by the 15th. These are the new districts, by the way. The 15th, the 40th, the 46th, the 39th, the 40th, the 46th, the 48th, and the 50th. So the 15th district is State Representative Josh Kale. He actually hails from Beaver County. This district stretches up into Beaver County. I was looking at the numbers. Would Josh Kale be vulnerable to a Republican or Democrat from Washington County? Well, the part that's in Washington County that is the population does not outnumber the part that's in Beaver County. So if there's a young Washington County guy out there or woman who wants to run, go for it. But I think Beaver County is still the majority part of the 15th district. I guess we'll go by the numbers. The 39th district is basically Allegheny County, but it's represented by a gentleman from Union, Washington County, Mike Puskaric. And that district is more in Allegheny County than in Washington County. And Puskaric is being challenged by Elizabeth Township Commissioner Andrew Kuzma, who is running against him in the Republican primary. And we'll see whether it matters which county you are from. But that part of the 39th that's in Washington County is smaller, obviously, than the Allegheny County. The 40th district is represented by Natalie Mihalik, who originally was from Upper St. Clair, but is now from Peters Township. Her district, part of her district, 40% of her district in Upper St. Clair was taken away from her. So her district is moving south into Washington County. It makes sense for her to be a Washington County resident now. And that's the 40th district. The 46th district is represented by Jason Ortitai, who is from Cecil in Washington County, but his district goes into South Fayette, goes into part of Allegheny County just north. The 48th district is Tim O'Neill. His district, frankly, is the only district in Washington County that is wholly within Washington County. So Tim's district, again, is just completely Washington County, and you can see how it stretches right across the southern central part of the county. And then finally, the 50th district was represented by Pam Snyder, Democrat from Greene County. She was an unusual Democrat because she won Republican votes all the time. Her district became more Republican. She's announced her retirement. Bud Cook, who also lives in this district and is in Washington County, is the incumbent, and he will run for re-election. I don't know yet whether he will be challenged in the Republican primary. The nominating petitions have not yet gone out on this race because these district lines still need to be finalized by the Supreme Court. We expect that to happen around March 15, at which point the court will say, now's the time to circulate your nominating petitions. So, I mean, right now it would appear that Bud Cook from Washington County would represent this district, but there could be someone from Greene County. You never know. So that's kind of the lay of the land for the politics right now. I'm going to conclude with this last slide, because what we don't know about 2022's election is this a referendum on President Biden and or President Trump? We don't know. We don't know what the impact is going to be of these gentlemen on these local races or even on the statewide races. And obviously, we know that Pennsylvania was a hard-fought battle in both 2016 and 2020. Trump won Pennsylvania by 42,000 votes, very narrow, 42,000 out of 6 million in 2016. Biden won it by 80,000 in 2020. I mean, these are very narrow margins. So it remains to be seen how these gentlemen play, whether the candidates embrace these guys or try to distance themselves. But that's going to be part of what makes campaign 2022 so fascinating for people like me who cover it and who enjoy talking to all these candidates who are running. I hope, Jeff, that's been a very quick, and I apologize for the quickness, but a quick rundown of what we're seeing in this year's election coming up, starting with our May primary, which is only weeks away. But I'd be delighted to answer any questions or field any comments that anybody would like to offer at this time.
Jon, thank you as always for the great presentation and your political insights. We always appreciate your thoughts. We do have a couple of questions that came through, and if you don't mind, we can ask them to you now. The first one, it mentions that from what they understand, that the GOP, the state Republican Party, is appealing or taking the congressional maps to the United States Supreme Court. Yes. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think there'll be any changes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm sure all your questions will be good ones. There is an effort to try to federalize the question of congressional redistricting in Pennsylvania. I think it's a big challenge. I'm going to wear my lawyer hat for a moment. I think it's pretty tough to do. The federal Constitution provides that it's up to the legislatures to provide for the means by which we elect federal officials. And so it's on the basis of that those who are seeking federal relief are arguing that the state Supreme Court does not have the authority to approve congressional district lines, that only the legislature can do it. But the legislative process failed because the Republicans and the Democrats did not work together. The Republicans that control the state House and the state Senate would not cut a deal with the Democrats in the state House and the state Senate. And the governor wouldn't intervene. As a Democrat, he said, you guys got to work this out at the legislature. And they didn't. And they passed a partisan Republican bill that the governor vetoed. And then the governor offered his own partisan bill. So you got, two bills, one very Republican, one very Democratic. The state Supreme Court, because there's no other recourse but to the Supreme Court, essentially picked a map that sort of cut the difference. As I say, it's a map that the Republicans are likely to win a majority of the congressional districts this year in Pennsylvania. I don't know what the federal court's going to do. It's very hard to predict, but it's an effort. This effort is one to try to get to argue that the state Supreme Court, even though the Pennsylvania Constitution gives them clear authority with respect to elections in 2 provisions. I mean, it just seems very hard. The question is, does the US Supreme Court, do federal courts want to intervene in what has been perceived traditionally as a state responsibility, which is to draw congressional districts? We don't have, that's not done by the Congress. That's not done by federal courts. That is supposed to be done by the states. And we'll see where that one goes.
Okay, thank you. I would also like to remind our audience that you can submit your questions on the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. The next question is concerning natural gas development, of course, in Washington County.
Right.
You guys know, John, it's very important to us here in the county that we continue to expand the industry. And the question is, do you think that Josh Shapiro, if he wins his gubernatorial race, may cause significant problems for the natural gas industry? You know, any thoughts on what he might be able to do, what his positions are, things of that nature?
Yeah, he's between a rock and a hard place on this. I think he understands that the reason Joe Biden and frankly even Tom Wolf were successful in Western Pennsylvania was because they did not oppose fracking in this region. You know, I've interviewed all the times, every time I interview Joe Biden, I've asked him about fracking and I've asked him about natural gas. And he's been very clear that he does not oppose fracking on private lands. He has opposed it on federal properties. He will say that, but he has not opposed the fracking industry. Governor Wolf is the same way, and with the nuance that, of course, he will say we need to have the proper environmental regulations in place to make sure that drinking water is safe and all that. That, of course, would be the Josh Shapiro line. That would be his instinct, would be to embrace that position. But he is being pushed by very strong environmental folks in the Democratic Party. And I can't tell you exactly where he will come out on this issue. My instinct with him, having interviewed him a gazillion times, is that he's not the ultra liberal. He really tries to be a much more sort of suburban moderate. I mean, he comes out of Montgomery County. He's not a city politician as such. And he tries, I think, in many ways to come across as moderate and reasonable and wanting to work together with people. So my gut tells me that he's not going to embrace a far left environmental agenda. But the honest truth is that until there's a Republican pushing him on one side, it gets hard to engage. He can kind of step back and appear to say all things to all people when we're not sure. So I can't predict exactly where he is. It's a great question, and frankly, the next time I interview him, I'll try to press him a little harder. How's that?
Yeah, make sure he tells you came up on this webinar. We appreciate that.
Oh, I will.
Another question is concerning the U.S. Senate race on the Democrat side between Connor Lamb and Lieutenant Governor Fetterman. The question is, who do you see in terms of electability? You have Connor Lamb, more moderate, but is raising less money. Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, a little more left-leaning, but has a considerable financial advantage. How do you see that coming about in the entire state of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's the one that Democrats are struggling with, because Connor Lamb is certainly saying that he would have the best shot against any of these multiple Republicans. Let's just say this to start with. Whoever wins the Democratic nomination is going to get plenty of money, because this is sort of the bellwether state as to which party controls the US Senate. So money will not be a problem in November, because national groups and national monies will flow into Pennsylvania to both parties as they fight it out in this state. I think the larger question is in the primary, and whether the messaging works in the primary. That Connor Lamb is suggesting that he has the best shot at winning. And what he's focused here is, frankly, Jeff, on the voters that supported him both in Washington County to help him win that special election by 0.3%, against Rick Saccone way back when, and suburban voters in Allegheny County that helped him beat Sean Parnell in the last election. That election was close. Connor won by 9,000 votes, 1 or 2%. But the fact is that it was close, and in part it's because of Lamb's appeal to a certain constituency of voter that doesn't normally vote Democratic. Connor Lamb, I believe, won Upper St. Clair. You don't do that unless you've got suburban Republican women voting for you. And so I think that's the argument they're making. I think it's very hard to predict, because Fetterman's approach is that he's got a tie to blue collar workers because of his appearance, his background, his gutsiness, and that there's an appeal to say a Democrat who might live in the Mon Valley, who might be thinking of voting Republican, but might vote for Fetterman because he's more their kind of Democrat. And that's the counter argument that you get. Polling suggests that Fetterman's ahead, but again, I think because Lamb is not that well known outside of Western Pennsylvania. He's spending a lot of time across the state, a lot of time in Philadelphia. He's becoming better known. But let's face it, Jeff, until these guys start running television ads, most people don't really know who you are if you're in Scranton. They'll know Fetterman because he's been lieutenant governor. And that's an advantage that Fetterman has that in my view, every day Connor Lamb is not on television is a good day for John Fetterman. And so far, we haven't seen Lamb on TV, or Fetterman for that matter.
One final question that came through as well is that, again, very similar on the Republican gubernatorial side. It seems like a very crowded field.
Yeah.
Do you feel that a more moderate has a chance of taking it, or someone perhaps do you have to be a little more right-leaning to get through the Republican primary? And then, of course, how does that make you, what kind of advantage or disadvantage does that have in an overall general election?
Well, that, of course, is another great question, and it's a tough one. Doug Mastriano, who is probably the most Trump-like, the most conservative of the candidates running, State Senator Doug Mastriano, he's, I believe, in second place to Lou Barletta in some of the early polls we've seen. We haven't had a most recent poll, so I want to be a little careful of that. Mastriano is thought to have a solid base of 20% of the Republican vote, 20%. You can win the Republican nomination with 20% of the vote when you've got 10 candidates in the race and they split every which way. So you could end up with a nominee who would clearly be embraced by Donald Trump and who would be the most conservative candidate. Now, then the question is that the way to galvanize a Republican base and win an election in November, or will that antagonize certain voters who will then vote for Josh Shapiro? And we don't know the answer to that question. I think you'll get from a Jake Corman that Corman is the one to go after Shapiro. I mean, he will argue this because, number one, he knows state government. He certainly does know state government. He's been involved for a while. And that his positions are very acceptable within the orthodoxy of the Republican Party. I think one of the things that interests me about the race for governor will be the extent to which Republicans, and here it won't matter who the Republican nominee is, whether it's Corman or McSwain or Dave White or Mastriano, they will all attach Tom Wolf to Josh Shapiro. And so, you know how I put up that picture of Trump and Biden? I probably could have put up a picture of Tom Wolf, because I think to some extent, will this election be a referendum on Tom Wolf? And to what extent can Josh Shapiro extricate himself from the last 8 years? Now, he's not been governor. He's not responsible for what Tom Wolf did as governor. His views on how to handle a pandemic or on natural gas or on anything could be very different. but he will need to separate himself in some ways without separating himself in such a way that it, tears the Democratic Party apart. Shapiro's a very shrewd and smart politician. I think he'll find a way to say, look, you're not running, he'll say to these guys, the Republicans, you're not running against Tom Wolf. You're running against me. And I'm really different. For one, I'm a heck of a lot younger than Tom Wolf. And I have a whole lot of, I think in a completely different way. And I have a record as Attorney General. And he's going to use that record as Attorney General, which is pretty solid in lots of ways. So I think the question of the kind of Republican that can win, my own view is I tend to think that the odds favor almost any Republican running in 2022 because of the national politics. But Pennsylvanians are pretty shrewd voters. And I think that we are likely to, I just think we're more likely to vote the person than the party. And while there's a party advantage for the Republicans right now, because of the general sentiment about the way, the direction of the country and all that, this is going to turn into a race between two individuals for governor and for US Senate. And we're going to hear a lot about these two individuals. They're, if it's one of the candidates from Connecticut or New Jersey or California, you're going to hear so much about that, lack of residency in Pennsylvania from the Democrats. And the Democrats, they'll have all kinds of issues, or the Republicans will have all kinds of issues, particularly on, do you really want someone in the Senate who's going to stand up for Joe Biden? So this is a fun election, guys. We're going to have a lot of fun watching this and seeing what happens along the way. And I hope this has been at least informative to your audience today, Jeff.
It's always an exciting time in Pennsylvania politics. And John, we certainly appreciate you being with us this morning. We have no additional questions that are coming through. So with that, we'll end it. I want to thank you, Jon Delano, for being with us again. Jon Delano, again, is the Money and Politics editor of KDKA-TV, CBS Pittsburgh. And John, we see that your wife has not yet let you out of the attic up there. So we hope you get out soon.
I love this attic. I really do. And I know it's become a bit iconic. I was on Katie Radio this morning with Larry Richard, and Kevin Battle, and they said the same thing. What do you think letting you out? If I can interview, Donald Trump or Joe Biden from this attic, which I've done, why not?
Yeah, I think you're doing well. But John, again, thank you so much for your insights and information. I know our membership appreciates it. And we certainly appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. We'd also like to thank Triple, our sponsor for this morning. And I'd like to remind our members that on March 25th, we'll be hosting our Municipal Leaders Breakfast. That's going to be sponsored by Moody and Associates. And that'll be a live event at Chartiers Township Community Center. We hope to see you there. On behalf of the Washington County Chamber of Commerce, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks for being with us and have a wonderful day. Take care.